Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 236 of the Fraternity Foodie podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book, From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing, is available now at Amazon. Go and pick up that book today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, smoking and binge drinking is actually at its lowest levels in 20 years among Gen Z students. So I really want you to think long and hard about how you're marketing your organization during recruitment season. If you're focusing on the stereotypes of fraternity life or college life, you might be missing out on some of those health conscious students on campus that are looking at college as a way to network, to get mentors, and to get the job or career that they're really looking for. So make sure your organization is being marketed towards these goals in order to reach the maximum number of students on your campus and the right students that are going to do the work and help your organization move forward. Our next guest is Dr. Samantha Pillay. Samantha finished school at 16 years old and commenced studying medicine at the University of Adelaide. Driven to take on challenges, she became the first woman in South Australia to complete the adult urological surgical training program despite physical limitations from congenital hip dysplasia. While training in urology, Samantha saw a need for a greater focus on incontinence treatments for women and a need for specialized care. Her vision was to establish a subspecialty practice, bringing the best treatments available to the women of South Australia. She became the first urologist in Australia to exclusively specialize in female and functional urology, establishing Continence Matters in 2002, subsequently building her single surgeon practice into a center of excellence. Samantha has devoted her career as a surgeon to treating incontinence, reducing the stigma, and educating doctors, health professionals, and the entire community. She is a single mother, a surgeon, running a business and a household, someone who enjoys writing in her spare time, and she's now the author of two Amazon #1 bestsellers, the No Recipe Cookbook, which is a cookbook for people who don't cook, so maybe I need to get this, and also When I'm a Surgeon, an inspirational children's picture book. Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me. What a wonderful introduction. I feel honored.
Hey, listen, it's my pleasure. If you need me to introduce you around Australia, I haven't been to Australia yet, so I am totally available. I mean, just pack me in your suitcase and I'm ready to go.
Yep, you can introduce me every time. Sounds great.
That sounds good to me. So, I want to talk a little bit about kind of your upbringing and some of your early days. I mean, you had many challenges as a kid. You started school in a wheelchair. You had real physical limitations from congenital hip dysplasia, and you finished school at age 16, which is just amazing. Then you start studying medicine, and you're the first woman in South Australia to complete the adult urological surgical training program. So I'm wondering, how did you get all of this drive to succeed at a very young age, despite all of the challenges that you had?
That's an interesting question because it's easy to think about it as an adult, but when I was a small child, how was I driven? And I think, I was in a lot of pain, but from birth, I didn't understand that. I didn't know any different. I didn't question it, and I had no other expectations because that was all I knew. And I think that has been a really big factor, especially in those very early years, of setting me up to push myself towards a goal. I mean, literally, in those days, in the early 70s when I started school, the wheelchair was the sort that I couldn't move myself. So the only way I could move was lying on like a modified skateboard and using my hands to push myself forward in a literal sense. But I think I always needed a goal and something to work towards, because that was a distraction from the pain, and it stopped me living in the here and now. And it was a habit that just has carried me through my life. I've always needed to be able to focus on that distraction and put all my effort and energy into that goal, so that I really wasn't aware of what I was experiencing at the time. And I think that was probably the fundamental thing that started in me pushing myself. The other thing is, we're talking about no computers, no mobile phones, no even video recorders for TV stations in Australia. And there's only so many episodes of, MASH and Hogan's Heroes I could watch as a child. So the studying was obviously what I could do. And I was lucky, I was good at it, but there actually wasn't really much else I could do. So I think that led to being able to reach those goals. I was really able to focus all of my time on that because there was very little else I could actually do.
Wow, that is just incredible. It's amazing how things happen like that. And you have a very niche market. I mean, you saw a need for a greater focus on incontinence treatments for women, a need for specialized care. Now you're the first urologist in South Australia to specialize in female and functional urology. So talk to us about finding this need in the market and then building a business around that idea. And you obviously understood very quickly that it was important for you to be the first in your niche to essentially capture market share, I guess, right? Is that kind of how it all played out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge demand on healthcare, so it wasn't like a business a solution. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to do this to kind of be busy, because I think you're going to be busy no matter what you do. I had my heart set on surgery. I wanted to be a surgeon, and then it comes down to choosing what specialty. Now, obviously, everyone had said, don't do whatever, doing medicine, great, but don't do surgery because of the standing. And urology is a surgical specialty where a lot of the operations done sitting down, and a lot of the operations are not long. There was no way I was going to be able to ever do a surgical specialty where I had 10-hour operations that I had to stand for. So that was definitely a factor. The fact that it was a very male-dominated specialty, we, at the time, only less than 4% of surgeons in Australia were female. So I don't actually know, but I'm sure it probably wasn't the only one I could have done and still been the first. But there wasn't that many women surgeons in South Australia. Urology's always been traditionally a very male-based subspecialty with prostates, but it also deals with cancers and stones. And I knew that being the one and only female, I'm going to get a lot of the women patients and urinary incontinence. And just like in medical school, even in surgical training, it really was low in the pecking order of our training. And I thought, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. I want to do further training in it. I want to do a fellowship in it, and I want to specialize, and so that I can serve those patients in South Australia, not just with excellence. And I think part of the other reason with subspecialization, because that was really uncommon in Australia, and I had been inspired by the United States, because there that wasn't uncommon. There were people already subspecializing, but not here. In fact, I was the first person for the whole of Australia and New Zealand to subspecialize sort of in female urology exclusively. So I didn't even do the general urology that I'd been trained in, which was a bit scary. So so there were multiple factors. I mean, one of the things was I thought that by restricting my practice, not only could I be excellent, which was important to me at what I did, I think I thought that I wouldn't be as busy. I actually had concerns about my actual physical capability of working full-time. And when I say working full-time, I mean working full-time like most surgeons do, 10, 14-hour days and stuff. So I didn't realize, because we didn't have the data back then, how common incontinence was and affecting like a quarter of the population. And so those part-time dreams never came to fruition. I was one off my feet from day one. But that was, I suppose, how it came to be. I love business and entrepreneurship, and not unique to the medical profession. I think if there's a problem and you can offer a solution and you can do it well, that is the success of business and entrepreneurship, solving people's problems. If you're the first and the only one doing it, it's much easier to be the expert. So I suppose I was lucky there.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think it's a good lesson for college students to think about as they start to think about their professions, their careers, and what they can do. Certainly somebody who's a specialist like you, I think, is going to do very well. And if you're the first one, I do think there's going to be a lot of business headed your way. And you know what? I'm grateful for urologists. I tell you what, as somebody who's lived a lifetime with kidney stones, as somebody who's had lithotripsy before, I will tell you that I am very, very grateful to the doctors here in this country for taking care of me. So that's really good. Now, you talked about the fact that 96% of the doctors there were men, or surgeons there were men. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the gender biases that you faced as South Australia's first female urological surgeon.
Yeah, we haven't got that much time, but there was a lot. So one of the things I think is really interesting is we've had probably almost 30 plus years where equal numbers of medical students, and I'm sure it's the same there, of male and female medical students. Mm-hmm. But what is unusual is for women to choose to do surgery, because it's seen as not that family friendly. So when I was a medical student wanting to do surgery, the people often, the common question is, okay, you're doing med, what do you want to do when you finish? And male colleagues would be met with a lot of praise and admiration when they said they wanted to be a surgeon. And as a female, it was like curious questioning, and why, are you sure you want to do that, etc. So when I was a medical student, I learned to qualify. When I'd say, I want to be a surgeon, I don't want to have kids. Now, when I was 16, 17, 18, that really was not on my radar. But the fact that I learned to say that just gives I think, a reflection of how society stereotypes different roles. When I was a registrar, and I was actually on the surgical training program, I remember, on Friday, everyone would head over across the road to the pub for drinks, and I'd be there with my male counterparts. They'd be talking to a young woman, and I'd overhear them sort of say, I'm a surgeon. I'm like, oh, you're a trainee like me. But, they'd say, I'm a surgeon. And, they get the response that they wanted. Yet for me, it didn't have the same response in the early 80s in Adelaide. It was a real conversation killer. And I was young. I actually started lying. I used to lie. If I'd meet, a guy or something, I wouldn't tell them that I was a surgical trainee. So it's just a huge difference in the way our society sees and values and responds to things, that I actually altered my behavior. Hopefully it's not like that now. But I mean, when you mentioned lithotripsy, the first time I went to do lithotripsy at one of the hospitals, I went up to the surgical change rooms, and the change rooms were doctors, the men, and nurses for the women. And we're talking over 20 years ago. They are male and female change rooms now. But the fact that as a surgeon, I was a surgical registrar at the time, I had to change in the nurses' change rooms because that's where the women changed. Gives you an indication of just where things have come from. I even remember when I'd been a surgeon for 5 years. When I had my son, I went back to work at 6 weeks. I'm getting the capsule out the back of a car. The nurse comes running out and goes, you can't park here. These car parks are for the doctors. I'm like, I've been parking here for 5 years, but now I've got a baby. I'm not just a woman, I'm a mother. So society just puts people into little boxes.
Wow. Well, I hope we've come a little bit further now. I hope and pray that we're a little bit better today. A lot of our students that are listening right now, I know that alcohol consumption happens on a college campus. I don't preach abstinence because I know that many college students are going to drink alcohol. So I'm a little bit more realistic, in terms of talking about what to do before you go out, what to do while you're out, what to do when you get home, etc. But, what are some ways that even low level alcohol usage might actually be preventing students from reaching their goals on college campuses?
Well, I can tell you it took, 40 something years or whatever for me to work this out. So when I was at medical school, when I went to med cam, I don't know if it's the same thing, but before you start your first week of university, there's a camp that you got all the new intake go on. I was still 16 when I went to that camp, and there was just alcohol consumption, like you would imagine, through university life. So what I've come to realize after a very, very long time, is that is questioned alcohol. So, again, I don't, think, so for me, it was a journey of, obviously binge drinking when I was young, and then, sort of more socializing. And then when I was in my 40s, my income, I had a surgeon's income, and it was more of a, glass of expensive wine with dinner, and it changed. But what happened, there's a few things. First of all, at the times of my life that I've been happiest, I've drunk the least. But I actually started to ask myself some questions. So some of those questions I would say to students is, before even mentioning the health benefits, if you're thinking about where you want to be in life, and how you're going to get there. So one of the things, say, is networking. If you're going to meet someone who's going to change your life, you want to take advantage of an opportunity or get an introduction. You've got your elevator pitch, all the things that you get taught in, I think, college now. If you've had a few drinks and this person next to you hasn't, who's going to do better when it comes to making an impression? So that's one thing I'd think about. The next thing is productivity. So, I'd have a long day of work and I'd be tired and stressed. I'd want to drink to relax. Now I've learned other ways. I can have, a bath or a cup of tea. And what that does is means I'm still productive. Whereas once I'd have drink, I wasn't productive anymore. It means that I can get stuff done in the evenings. I wrote 5 books in the last year. So what I found is I was a high level achieving person. I didn't have an alcohol problem, but I could do that much more. And if you think of people at the top of their game, the people who are the sort of people that you might want to be like, the Olympic, whether it's Olympic athletes or, astronauts, they all can't afford to drink alcohol because they're trying to excel to that particular level. So that's sort of some of the areas. But then there's other things about, are you trying to save money? How much do you spend, and what would the compound interest on that, if over time, be? Is it impacting on your sleep? Is it are you actually trying to lose weight and struggling, not achieving those goals? It's not about what you what someone else next to you is doing, or how good you are, but just how much better you could be. I mean, its effect on the brain and learning. If you're a student, you're studying and you're cramming for your exams, and think of you having the drink and the effect it has on you versus you not having it, and those two different people, what are their likely outcomes? You might be getting great results, but would you be even greater? I think is the questions to ask.
Yeah, those are all great things to think about. I think really, we just need to teach college students ways to cope with stress. I think the coping skills are just not there. And so maybe if we explain, exercise, you mentioned tea, a bath, there's lots of other things that people can do in order to cope with stress other than alcohol. But unfortunately, we haven't taught them those things. And so that's what they turn to. So I think it's part coping skills too.
I
So,
was really, I've been very stressed a lot of my life,
yeah.
and I don't think I'm alone. And that was a really big thing for me because obviously I was really stressed. I had business, I working as a surgeon, I was a single mom, had a young kid, and the best way to, I thought, help my stress was have a glass of wine, and maybe even just one or two is all I need, or a long day work, let's have a gin and tonic while I make dinner or something like that. Now, you think that's helping with your stress, but because it doesn't actually teach you life skills of how to deal with stress, it actually stops you from dealing with your stress. And any problem that you need to solve or work through or resolve, you don't actually resolve. So it just keeps mounting up. Now, the other thing is, with my medical hat, is that the effect of alcohol is, stress and anxiety and poor sleep. So alcohol actually causes anxiety. And, we have a very stressful population now, and also a very high level of alcohol intake in our population. And as soon as I didn't try and stop drinking. I was just looking at the health benefits, and then I would be thinking, no, I don't think I want to drink anymore, because I was worried about, my health. I was in my 50s. I wanted to live longer. I wanted to look younger. So I just stopped wanting to drink alcohol. But I've never been so less stressed by not drinking alcohol. It's the opposite to what you think, So I think, obviously, with people who have severe alcohol dependence, the levels of anxiety and stress are out of control, to the point that sometimes they even need, tranquilizers, sedation kind of thing when they have withdrawals. But in just low level alcohol stops you from addressing your stress, and it causes stress. So, you have it to escape your stress, but when the effect of it wears off, you're actually more stressed than you were. So it is this addictive trap.
hmm You've also noticed some of the parallels between smoking and drinking alcohol in terms of lessons not learned. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is so when I was going on this journey, I was sort of thinking, God, I wish I'd worked all of this out years ago. I could have been healthier. I could have probably been more productive. I know I've done a lot. Yeah, but what, could I have done more? And I started looking into some of the health, and that was what I just stopped wanting to drink alcohol after I looked at all the health risks. And when I was looking at it, I was thinking, God, this just seems a lot like what happened with smoking. And so I started sort of researching what happened with smoking, and, read some reports on the history of smoking. Just things like smoking was affecting what was, the 70% of the population, which is almost 72%. I think the states, I looked it up the other day, was like 69.5. So the rates of alcohol consumption are very similar. Things like it crosses to the brain very quickly. It develops tolerance. In other words, you keep needing more for the same effect. The effect, it causes stress and anxiety. It was so entrenched in culture that even doctors smoked, and some of them even endorsed products. The young people were often dismissive of their health risks and exaggerated the benefits that they got from it. That the majority started very, very young, and the biggest influence was the parents as role models that they saw smoking. It was just like you could just replace the word with drinking. So it was more heavy. Smoking was more prevalent in vulnerable populations. It's like did anyone just? And the other thing was, if we'd known what the health effects of smoking were, we would have never allowed it to be introduced into the market in the first place. You know, the commercial and economic implications of it. The fact that when that smoking was removed from bars and restaurants, that actually it didn't reduce patronage or the revenue of the establishment. So, you know, just amazing looking at this. I wrote an article, so I've written a few things about health. It's actually on my website if people want to look, samanthapillay.com, about the effects of alcohol and the parallels. And it's pretty sort of scary, you know, people being dismissive of the effects. So in the US, when they look at you know, your guidelines are that heavy drinking for a female is 3 drinks a day, 3 standard drinks a day, and 4 for male. That's heavy, the highest level. Yet, you know, if I went out to dinner before, I didn't really think 3 glasses of wine over an evening was that much. And why? Because everyone else was doing it, and half the people were having twice as much as me. So that's how I kind of thought about it. I didn't look at the data. You know, 3 drinks a week increases a woman's risk of breast cancer by 15%. So, you know, the data's there, but you just kind of have this belief and you kind of make these assumptions up. You know, if you're having got that 3 or 4 for female male drinks in a day, 5 days within a month, then you are classified as a heavy binge drinker. You know, and well, that's what I would have been in medical school, you know, in a month. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you said all of that. I think, you know, smoking cigarettes in the United States certainly is way down over the last 20 years, but now students are starting to pick up vaping. So now it's like, well, you know, is vaping somehow a healthier alternative to cigarettes? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, we're just substituting one thing for another thing. And at the end of the day, it's the same active ingredient. So, man, oh man, I don't know. It's kind of depressing at times. Like, I feel like we're making progress, but then we take like a couple of steps backwards.
Well, I think the thing is, you know, we're living longer. So the young students, the kids now, they're going to live till they're 100. So it's a long game. It's a marathon. And with these things, the health problems might not materialize for decades. So therefore, it's easy to dismiss it. But how you live your life in the first 50 years is going to set you up for the quality of life you have in the last 50 years. I every day see people with chronic disease. You know, if you sort of think that you're just going to be lucky and have a fantastic, healthy life and you suddenly drop dead one day, no, that's not what happens. People are spending all of their money and time in healthcare with a greatly reduced quality of life while they manage chronic disease, 80% of which is preventable. So, you know, and you've only got one body.
Yeah,
you know,
very
one
true.
life.
Very true. Unfortunately, I just think, you know, today's college students, they're often just thinking about today. They're not thinking about how today's actions are going to affect them in the long run and what that means for their quality of life as they are 50, 60, 70 years old. They're just not thinking about that kind of stuff.
And it comes around real quick, I can tell you.
I know. I know. Tell me about it. I blinked and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm almost 50. Like,
Yeah.
that's unbelievable. Now, you're the author of 5 books. You mentioned how productive you've been over the last couple of years writing books. And I also wrote a couple of books during the pandemic. It was just a great time to put pen to paper and just start being productive while I was stuck at home. So how has creative writing enhanced your skills as a surgeon?
Yeah, so that's another one of the articles on my website. So, you know, I started, but when I wasn't drinking and I'm a single mum and I don't watch television, what else am I going to do? I started writing, and it was just a nice hobby. It was a great way for me to focus on something, because my mind's so busy, I really find mindfulness and meditation hard. My mind wanders. But if I'm really absorbed in a project or concentrating, it's the same sort of ability to switch. I switch off one thing and switch on to something else. So I didn't think that creative writing, a cookbook and children's books could have anything to do with my role as a surgeon or a businesswoman. But in actual fact, what I discovered and what I was surprised about is how in actual fact it did help. So how did it help? I mean, first of all, mental acuity. I went into surgery because, I like being at the top of my game. I like my brain working as hard as I can. I like being under pressure. I like that excitement. I've been a surgeon for over 20 years, and it's easy to get into cruise control. So, doing endless Wordle and Sudoku isn't enough. I needed something more. So doing a completely new skill outside of what you do, really helped with focus and mental acuity. But there were other things being, especially for business, you need critical thinking, and you need that sort of helicopter view. So as soon as you step out of the problems you're trying to solve and you're in another industry trying to solve other problems, it gives you that ability to have a perspective and a new light. So I felt that it really helped with both clinical and business complex problem solving. With books, as you would know, as an author, there's a lot of stuff that I just never done before, relating to marketing, social media. I got an Instagram account in my 50s, and so graphic design and a whole lot of stuff. Now, how is that relevant? I do a lot of presentations, death by PowerPoint lectures on surgery, on incontinence and stuff. So presentation skills, public speaking skills, my PowerPoint slides, all of that was helped. My written communication, verbal communication improved. And in actual fact, because of some publicity and stuff through the books, I actually got more people contacting me to talk about, incontinence at conferences, which was unrelated to the books, and on, online forums and stuff like that. So it was interesting. That was an unexpected surprise in the crossover of skills and how I felt that it actually helped my professional side.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think my whole world changed once I became a published author. So definitely would encourage people. And I think there's a book inside everybody, no matter what it is that you do. Write a book, go through that process, market that, public speaking, social media, the whole thing. Your life and the way that you look at just business in general is going to change completely. And we should talk about food for a minute. College students right now, I'm sure there's a lot of stress about what they're going to have for dinner and making the right choices. They don't have a lot of time, college students. They don't have a lot of money. So what are some ways that the college students can end the stress of all of that?
Yeah, and again, this took me decades to work out. I just said I wish I'd worked some of this stuff out earlier. So I remember studying for final exams and having cereal for dinner because, I just didn't have the time to cook. And it comes down to the fact that when you're really busy, and it hasn't really changed, I've just got busier, at the end of the day, I'm hangry and I've got decision fatigue. So just ordering Uber Eats on the phone, it takes too long. I can't wait that long for food, and it's just an effort to make a decision. Going out takes time. Even, you get home and you're exhausted. The last thing you want to do is head out, even if you're going to, collect and bring it home. Don't want to wait for a meal delivery. So, getting food on the table is a lifelong problem. And I know people will say I don't cook, but you're going to eat, possibly 3 meals a day for your whole life. It's a real disability. It's going to cost you your health and a fortune over your lifetime if you don't know how to prepare basic meals. And I think we've got so much convenience foods now that we forget how important it is to be able to prepare simple meals. So I was spending a fortune on cookbooks, and I was spending hours on the weekend trying to go through, work out what to cook. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And then I worked out how I literally changed my life. I literally changed my life. So for me, it was about stress and time were the biggest factors. I worked out that I didn't need a recipe. I'd just been sold this myth that by cooking shows and celebrity chefs that you needed this picture perfect meal. And I developed a basic repertoire of just go-to meals where I could just vary the ingredients. So there was a little bit of variety, but I could mix it up, whether it was a stir fry or a slow cook or a pasta or various sort of go-to recipes. And then I worked out that, and part of this came from the fact that with my hips, if I shopped, I'd virtually be in tears. I could hardly unpack the shopping. There's no way I could then cook a meal. So I had to kind of be very strategic in my steps that I had in my day. So I worked out that I could actually shop once every 2 weeks and plan the meal plan around the shelf life of the ingredients. So some of the things that aren't going to last that long, you eat early, and there's, you might have your root vegetables or various other things that you've got for your meals in the second half of the week. So I saved myself loads of time just by doing the shopping once every 2 weeks. We call that a fortnight in Australia, once every 2 weeks. Then by just being able to vary the ingredients, it didn't take me as long to write out the list. I could shop with what's on special, what's available, now with food supply issues, with what's happening in the world and COVID. And then I could cook I learned a way to actually cook where, before I might get everything ready and then start to cook. Say I was doing vegetables, I'd actually learn how to, I could even saute them in the one pan. And put the ones that took the longest cooking time, so cut them, and then while they're cooking, cut the next one, and then while they're cooking, cut the next one, so that I actually got it to the time that I just kept adding. And I could have dinner on the table within 20 minutes. I wasn't having to measure things. I had half the washing up. And so that was how the no recipe cookbook for people who don't cook. There's no recipes, no pictures. It's written in prose. It's really, meant to save a student what the cost of the book in one day. They can download it, and that was the how it came about. It really, and I have over the last couple of years not used another cookbook. I have just varied those meals. I am walking the talk. I actually live it since I wrote my book. So it's changed my life. I wrote the book for me, and hopefully it will help other people out there. There are, I think, 4 sample meals that you can download for free on my website. So if students want to go to samanthapillay.com onto the No Recipe Cookbook, you can actually just download a few of the chapters and get started and do some meal prep.
I think there's a lot of students that are going to be heading over to your website immediately now. So I think that is great stuff. Now, I know you like to cook at home, which is great. But, we do like to go out every once in a while and have a really nice meal. And I don't know if I'm ever going to get to Adelaide, Australia. I certainly hope so, because that is like one of the destinations that I would love to be. And if I do get to town, is there like a favorite restaurant of yours in town? And what kind of food do they serve there?
So, well, Mark, if you come to Adelaide, I will cook you dinner. You do not need to go out. Okay, so you can come to my place. One of the things is, obviously there was big financial savings and food waste with the cooking, but the biggest thing is, how much calories there is when you eat out. All those hidden calories and sugars and salt. And fat that in meals. So we don't eat out very often, but our local, which I'd probably say would be our favorite place, because again, it's easy and it's just around the corner, is called 6 and 5, because it opens at 6 a.m. and does breakfast, but it also opens at 5. So the things that we love about it might not be on the bucket list for young hip students. One, it means that I can take my son there and we can eat at 5 o'clock. Because there's not a lot of restaurants that are open that early. It doesn't serve alcohol, so it's really quiet. And it's Asian, so it's simple stir fries, veggies and lean meat, etc. So it's healthy food.
That sounds really good to me, but you're right. I think the best meal in town is probably in your kitchen. So, so that sounds good. If I do end up in Adelaide, you better believe I'm going to give you a call, because I know you're going to cook something really great.
Absolutely. And without a recipe.
That's right. All right. So if all of our listeners right now, let's say they want to go and buy your books, they want the cookbook, they want to connect with you, where should they go in order to get all of this information and buy your books?
Okay, so to connect with me, if you visit my website, on there are all the social media links: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. So that's probably the easiest place. Samantha Pillay, PILLAY.com. The books are available online through, there's hardback, paperback, and ebooks for the recipe cookbook and the children's books. Online retailers, so Amazon, Book Depository, Barnes and Noble, Booktopia, Google Play, iTunes. Most of the online retailers, that you can find them. There are links through my website, or you can go direct to just about any online retailer to get the books.
Dr. Pillay, you are just a wealth of information. So I really enjoyed spending time with you. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you in Australia. That would be a lot of fun one day for me, certainly. So what can I say? I mean, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for writing the books. Thank you for just being a resource for all of our college students that I'm sure are going to have so many questions for you. So you might get flooded with emails, but I know that you would be happy to help. So.
Absolutely. Pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed Dr. Pillay's talk today, please like it, please share it with other college students. Go and pick up her books, and we hope to see you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.